It's not easy to scale agroecology. Why? Because it's not just a set of practices. It's a transition. It is a process. What we're scaling is not, however much I promote it, agroforestry. It's not just compost. It's not just seeds, local seeds. It is a process of transforming a farming and social system. And it cannot be all done at once. Agroecology is knowledge intensive and, more importantly, context specific. So you can't scale. It's not like a McDonald's franchise where you can just have the model and then start giving money and it plants it everywhere. It doesn't work that way. And what works in one territory might not be very useful elsewhere, frankly. So it needs a lot of creativity. There's a tendency to focus on spreading one or two highly productive farming practices. In Burkina, it's that Zai method and agroforestry or compost or the seeds. And that's what we focus on, the one thing. We don't look at the whole system. And what's scaled is a technique rather than what? The process. Thank you. So aside from the agroecological techniques, what else needs to be scaled? Well, we've talked about all these things. They're not new. But how do we integrate all these things? That's what we're going to be talking about. Social, cultural, institutional issues. Women's empowerment. We heard a lot of that. And what I mean by women's empowerment is decision-making of women and women's access to land, big issue in West Africa, tools, seeds, and credit. So that has to be part of the process. So what are some of the strategies that the network of Groundswell in West Africa, what we've gained? Well, first, the idea of process. So we follow a progressive process. You can't do everything at once. So start as simple as possible. Promote only 2 or 3 agroecological practices at first. Try to see which of those practices can provide quick wins or immediate tangible results, because that's what will motivate and interest farmers to try out the next wave and the third wave and the fourth wave in a gradual deepening process. Foster farming learning from other farmers via field visits, as you see in the picture. Organize practical hands-on training. Decentralize that training so that locations can be reached by everyone, including women who often are not very mobile. Husbands don't like it when the women travel too far from the villages. So in our experience, early success, if you get the right combination or the right selection of practices, will motivate farmers to go into the next phase, the next step, towards a transition towards ever more complex set of agroecological practices. So equity means that you tailor your interventions to the specific needs of different groups. The better off families have animal seeds, water, land, power. The more marginalized groups, the poorer families, don't have those resources. Sometimes they don't even have chickens. And then the youth, and then the women. So you need, and I'm sorry to say this, I don't see it that often in agroecology practice, where you identify different groups, and then you tailor specific packages, or package, I don't like the word package, different sets of support for different groups within the community. And that requires some discussion or dialogue within the community. Otherwise, there's misunderstanding, jealousy, why are you helping, giving them more and not us, all that type of thing. So there's a whole case study I've written on all this, that's 30 pages, but I just want to illustrate the point here. So you engage the broader community in a dialogue, you develop intentional strategies for equity, you build on local social cultural values, because there are in villages the idea that you help each other. That exists, that's part of this local knowledge that we talk about all the time. It also has values and commitment. Some of it is family, some of it is clan, and others is just neighbor helping neighbor. Build on that so that there can be, nobody's left behind in the transition towards agroecology. So that's the second strategy. Third, we have to transform governance and enable communities to lead. So, as I pointed out, I hope you all agree It's not the leading role of government is not to do everything for communities, it's to enable communities to do things for themselves. The agency, or the role of village-based organizations and community leaders should be at the heart of scaling. And I fear that even if we succeed in transforming policies and governments start taking big programs to promote agroecology, that factor, that communities are at the heart of those massive mobilization that needs to go on, will not be at the center. Because that's not what governments are usually good at. We, civil society, are good at that. We need to negotiate for a voice and our role to help facilitate that, in my view. One way that we do that is through the role of caravans. Do any of you know what I mean by caravan? No? You find all the different regional, provincial, municipal decision makers, the local councils, the provincial level decision makers, the Ministry of Agriculture, the elected officials, politicians, and you get them up into 2 or 3 buses, or these cars you see in the background of the picture, and you take them from village to village to village over a week, and you bring the media, and they get interviewed. No politician, every politician likes to be interviewed and seen on TV or heard on radio. It's amazing once you bring all those politicians who are sitting in those chairs and they see it and they talk to villagers, and not just once, but 5 times, 6 times. Of course, you have to make sure they go to comfortable hotels and they have water and all of that. It's not easy, but it's important and a huge way to start creating spaces, at least at the local level, for local governance to be strengthened. Then you also have to convince the community leaders and religious leaders in the communities as well. So I think that the role of outside actors, such as NGOs, technical assistant agencies, is to support this process of communities managing their own actions. And scaling, and then finally scaling is all the more rapid when all the actors share a similar vision and understanding of agroecology. And I really would like to emphasize the idea of a caravan as a way, and that can be at the national level as well. We've done that as in addition. The cabinet ministers in the parliament that are in charge of agriculture, we take them out to see where agroecology is really working. So they get a sense, you're not just arguing about what is agroecology. Take out and talk directly to farmers. It really makes a difference. So, let me repeat. Taking agroecology innovations to scale is not feasible, in my view, to be scaled anyway, unless communities mobilize themselves and fully engage in the process. And at the heart of that, there's not enough money, there are not enough agents to go to every single village, to every single neighborhood in every single village to promote agroecology. I'm sorry, dude, this isn't. And there isn't enough time even, given the climate emergency. So the only thing that I can see is that we have to help farmers learn how to teach other farmers. We have to help mobilize communities to help teach other communities. Farmer to farmer, learning and spread of agroecology needs strengthening of capacities of communities to lead and manage their own programs, and also to spread it. So now, let me show you this diagram. I hope you can see it. So now I'm talking about the 8 phases. This is sort of together with the 3 strategies, mostly in the first one. And I'm going to talk about the 3rd phase here in particular. This is like a commune in French, un commune, or a district, or a parish. I don't know, you have different words for it. And there might be 80 villages there. How long is it going to take to reach all the 80 villages? A long time. So what we do, one strategy we have found useful, is to cluster those villages into, develop clusters of villages so that there might be 5, 6 villages in our clusters, or it could be up to 10 or 15. Each of them with 5 to 10 villages in each cluster. Then within each cluster, you look for the most dynamic, interested, good leadership village, and we call that a motor village. And we start our work in the motor villages. And without making a long story, that once that is some success in that motor village, then we provide support and encouragement and bring the leaders from the neighboring villages to come and see. And then we provide training to the best off farmers in the motor villages to go out with a small stipend or something, some sort of incentive to provide support to the neighboring villages. And I've not seen a village who doesn't see the neighboring village over there doing something and they say, oh, that's not useful. If they are benefiting, they want to come and see. So we just have to find ways of creating that incentive. So I'm going to phase 4, learning visits. So I've already talked a bit about that. Within each cluster, motor villages serve as a learning center. You can see some of the work. And then the phase 5 is farmers training other farmers, men and women. Then phase 6, integrate some of the more complicated practices and social issues. After the first wave, hopefully we'll be successful, initiate the second wave. While that second wave is going on, start a dialogue to undertake additional activities to address the equity, the women's empowerment, and nutrition. Again, you can't do all that at once. In the first day you come and talk about all the whole process. So this is something that you start to do in a phased process. And then the last, next to last phase is strengthening governance. You see here the workshop, RNA is Régénération Naturelle Assistée, and strengthen the capacity of local government leaders, changing their policies, integrating the agroecology into their budgets and plans is another part of scaling. Then the last phase is the reaching out and advocacy. You can see some pictures there. The caravan, the woman is speaking in front of the assembly of decision makers, organize competitions, use media, connect to other networks within the country, try to create this momentum that I talked about with the energizer to persuade enough actors to shift their ways, demonstrate the success of agroecology. It's not papers with evidence, it's talking to people whose lives have been transformed or improved that I think is the most persuasive way to inspire change in decision makers. And then we have here the media, farmer-led campaign, so that's involved, that you can see there in the picture. Media engagement, we really have to cultivate the media. Take them on these trips, these caravans. Produce documentaries, organize caravans. Then this last part is something I have not seen very often. This is Ghana, for those that you don't recognize it. What we did was a study to map all the different organizations in the country that are engaged, or at least supportive of, agroecology. And what we found is that most of us did not know what was going on in the neighboring region. And we did this mapping, we hired some consultants, we didn't even get everybody, and then we brought them all together and convened them, and we started learning from each other, forging relationships. And then we talked about the recommendations and the messages that, like the ones we just did here, to government, and what makes sense. And we had lots of discussion around the policies. And that is the way that we're trying to build a movement outside of our own program areas, but a national level movement. And now I'm happy to say after 3 years that we have an agroecology movement or network in Ghana that goes through this process. So the key messages: scaling agroecology is more than technology, it's a process to foster transition. It is a progressive process that needs a carefully managed sequential strategy adopted to each context. And I've mentioned the 3 fundamental strategies for success from our experience anyway. Thank you.